Welcome to Discovering. Tonight, Kristen looks for agates along the Lake Superior shoreline. We'll take a look at fishing reel repair.
When you do take your line off your spool, make sure you take it off clockwise.
And it's blueberry time in the UP. Sit back and relax. It's Monday night and time for Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forest thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill. The eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
Last year, I visited Beth Milner Jewelry in Marquette to see how she creates some of her agate jewelry.
So this is a rock here that I found in Marquette on the beach, and it's a little bit hard to tell that it's an agate, and some of the ones I find here aren't good quality, so there might be lots of holes and pits, or they'll break apart when I go to cut them. Most of the agates, if anybody's a rock hound that's watching, are that I'm finding here in Marquette are seam agates or moss agates, and there's many different kinds of Lake Superior agates.
This summer, I returned to Marquette to learn how to find these Lake Superior agates. I met up with Beth's assistant Nina at Picnic Rocks.
The most accessible beach to get rocks like ever. It's so nice.
Lake Superior agates were formed over 1 billion years ago in lava pockets and seams in the UP, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, and glaciers pushed them throughout the Midwest. Agates are known for their rich red, orange, and yellow colors and self-organized structure. The telltale banding or striping that was created as iron and quartz-rich groundwater crystallized to fill in the hollow lava pockets, layer by layer, forming the agate.
Marquette agates are weird compared to like regular other types of agates. It depends on like where you're at. So some of them, like the Keweenaw agates, are very opaque. You can't really see through them, and they have these very distinct stripes. And I have my like wedding ring is a Keweenaw agate actually. The Marquette ones are usually like, sometimes they look like little sandwiches, like Oreos. And that one is an agate, one of the seam agates, my sandwiches. There are a ton of those. There's also one that I brought from the other day that is really cool, and it's a very good example of the kind of weird agates that you find in Marquette. It's kind of got like this little ring around this part, and you can see all of those lacy bits right here, and that's what makes it an agate. And it's all the way around, and it's got this beautiful little lace. And then the rest of it looks like this, so. Yeah, that one is like a really cool indication of like the agate nodule. Because I think that what happened here is that it was kind of like in like, this is the whole thing almost, because it doesn't have any broken pieces around it. And it's got these bubbles. Usually in the water, actually. That's where I find most of mine because it's just easier. But you can find them up here on the dry part too. They're just not as immediately apparent because, I mean, they're dry. Some have kind of a waxy look to them. Oh, I found one. I have a little spray bottle. There's like that little sandwich stripe that I was talking about, because this is the top and the bottom, and those like little stripes. And then you can see like a little pop of color right there. That's fun. First one of the day. so cool. That's definitely not an agate, but that's a sweet rock. But sometimes there are rocks that do have stripes that are not agates. Here's a perfect example of this is not an agate, but it has tons of stripes. So, let's see. This one is completely opaque, and it's not, it doesn't have a waxy look when it's dry. There are opaque parts in an agate sometimes, but this one is all opaque and it's completely banded all the way around, which makes me think that it's maybe a chert or a sandstone. Yeah, that's one that a lot of people pick it up and they're like, is this an agate? And it's easy to like mistake something for an agate if you don't exactly know what you're looking for. But that's the fun part, right? I'm looking for ones that have that bubbly texture almost, or like looks kind of sandwiched between something. The ones that we like the most are the ones that have a very clear, large amount of like agate, like a piece of agate, so we can cut it down, because you have to cut a lot off to make it like that pretty round shape, you know? So as long as it's like a very strong pattern is something that Beth looks out for. And she goes to the Keweenaw and sometimes even to Minnesota on her like little vacations to find like even cooler agates. Because these ones are like, I love them and they're like totally unique to Marquette, but also they're not like the fanciest agates that you find. But this one on the end right here has all the stripes, like right here and right here. And sometimes you never know until you break them open either. Because we have like got a tile saw that cuts agates in half. And then we also have a lapidary wheel at the shop, which also helps. Because then you can actually see what's inside of these things. Because sometimes they're really cool on the outside, but it's just the crust. Oh, look at that one. That one's great. There's this really pretty stripe right here. And that is very classic agate. Yeah, that's a really good one. Super pretty. Here's another one. I think that this one might be a water level agate, which it means like the water level like was rising very like evenly, so it's all the same stripe. And you can kind of see like the light shining through it too, so it's like semi-transparent, which is pretty cool. There's usually like some transparent bits in there, and like the easiest way to see it is when you're picking either when the sun is really low in the morning or at sunset, because you can kind of like see it glance, the light glancing off of the rocks in that really low light. Whereas like when the light is coming down like this, all the rocks tend to look very similar. So this one kind of is a little lumpy, like a brain almost. It looks kind of spongy on the outside. And then right here, you can see like the banding in this little circle shape. And like all this stuff right here. And then on the side, there's kind of a chevron, which is like a very classic agate shape, is like that kind of like arrow shape. So that's really cool. Oh, this one's pretty cool. There are other agates that are like, they call them like plume agates or moss agates, and they kind of have this little kind of a frothy look to them. And they have those like tiny little circles right here within that like quartz layer.
Here in the UP with Lake Superior, it's the perfect place to be a rock hound.
Someday I'm hoping to find like a really big like 1 pound agate. Like that's just magnificent.
And the more I do these stories, the more I want to spend time on the beaches just searching for that perfect agate. I also learned there is such a thing as copper agates, which is really fascinating to me because I'm also working on a story about UP copper, which you are soon to see right here on Discovering.
Check out just about any garage wall in the UP and you'll find a couple of nails with a fishing rod hanging on them. And that rod undoubtedly has a reel attached. A reel that you want to keep in tip-top condition.
I've been in the business 43 years, and I seen an outfit in the back of a magazine, so I sent out for it, and ever since then I've been fixing reels, and I'd like to show you a few here. We got a fly reel here. This is the manual type one, and another one here that's the automatic one. I do repair them and got some parts for them. Next in line here is the Zebco 33. They're called the spin casting reels or push button, and this is the Zebco, and it's probably the most famous of the ones. Next one is a spinning reel, and most people use these. Probably more of these sold than all of them combined. And the next one is a bait caster reel, and these are used mostly by bass fishermen. They have a different gear ratio too. And then the last one is used, it's a line counter reel. You can see the footage there. And these are used mostly on Lake Michigan and Lake Superior. These push button ones, usually what goes wrong with them is the gears go in them once in a while, and these rotor caps don't work very good. On bait casting reel, now you got the pawl and the worm gear in there. When you repair these, if you're doing it yourself, you use oil in there. If you do use grease, the grease is going to pile up on either side, and it'll take your worm and pawl out. On the spinning reels, mostly they have a bail spring that goes wrong with them, or the trip lever. When you flip the bail here, it catches on like a ski jump outfit, and when that wears out, that's a molded part of the reel there, and then you have to replace it with a new reel. And on the line counters, it's the same thing. You have the worm gear and the pawl here, and like I said, if you put grease on these, it'll pile up in the side there, and it'll take it out. Dip a little oil in there maybe once every 5 or 6 times out, and you'll be all set. We got our spool here, and we're going to put some line on it or show you what to do. This spool is a Mitchell 300, and it holds 300 yards at 10-pound test. Now, when you're fishing from shore, you don't need that much line on, so I use a backing, and you can wind the backing on here. This is just regular thread. It's the same thing you use for making porchetta or wrapping a porchetta. So you just put some of this on here, tie it off there, and then you can only get like 125 yards on here. If you're going to use it for Lake Michigan fishing or something, you would take it off and use the 300 yards. You can also use fishing line here for a backing. If you're using this braided line like spider wire or vanish or something, you have to put a backing on it. Either this backing or that backing. You have to put it on, otherwise all your line will just spin on the spool here. Okay, now we're going to put some line on the spool here. When you do take your line off your spool, make sure you take it off clockwise. Whether you're doing it with a machine here or you hold a pencil and put it through the spool here, you have to take it off clockwise. Now, most people don't have machines like this. They'll just do it off the reel there, and then, like I said, holding it with a pencil. You always want to stay at least a 1/4 inch away from the edge of the spool. You do not want to fill it all the way up, because when you open the bail, all the line will come shooting off. And on a push button reel, you don't want to fill it up all the way, because it'll get caught on your rotor there and get stuck underneath there. So we should be all set there. When you get done with your reels here in the fall, I recommend that you bring them in so I can clean them. On a bait casting and a line counter reels here, they're $5 to clean and grease them. On a spinning reel, it's $4. And on a spin casting, it's $3, which is really cheap. Recommend in the winter time. That's when I have more time, because I'll be out fishing too. And I don't charge. I charge $5 and $4 and $3 to clean the reels there, but to put the part in, you'll be paying for the part, but I don't charge for putting the part in. That's all part of the cleaning and greasing. Besides fixing the reels, I wind eyes on here, and I can replace the tops for you. At one time there, I had a guy bring a $300 rod in here, and he wanted a two-piece one from his wife. So I went down the basement and I cut a $300 rod in half, and I put a couple of ferrules in there, and he was happy.
Blueberry picking is a great summertime tradition here in the UP. You can pick them wild or pick them at a farm. About all you need is a bucket and some bug spray.
So it's July, it's midsummer here in the Northwoods, and that means a couple different things. First and foremost, that means that it is berry season. Blueberries and service berries kind of kick it all off. And we're gonna go today and see if we can find some wild blueberries. There are a few trees that blueberries really seem to like to grow around. First of all, blueberries like barrens or soils that are rocky and almost nutrient deficient. They like a lot of rocks and moss and lichen and things like that. But in particular, they do work well with trees. When we look at the blueberry plant itself, you can see it has leaves that grow not opposite of each other, as in there would be two right here. So they're staggered all the way up. When we look at them, a lot of times these blueberries come in a nice little cluster, 2, 3, 4, etc. So I just pick a whole cluster right in. And then I'm trying to leave as much of the green berries on the plant as possible because wildlife does love them. So there's basically two different kinds of blueberries across the globe. When we think of blueberries at U-picks, etc., those are called high bush. And there's different species within that realm, but basically they grow tall, very tall. Not too uncommon to see them be bigger than you, taller than you. And there's low bush berries, and that's the wild blueberries. Low bush, call that because they're low, and they put off runners, which is a piece of the plant that goes, and then it forms a foothold, and then from there it continues to spread. Pretty important. But make sure we're getting the right thing. Now, blueberries can darken with age. Now, this particular berry is not a blueberry. Peel it off, and you're gonna see right away it has a hard woody pit. Blueberries do not have a pit. They have fine, tiny seeds. When we look at the plant structure, you can see two totally different plants going on here. This plant has much bigger leaves and much bigger, broader forking in the plant structure. Blueberries, more compact in nature for the plant. The leaves are gonna be this blue-green early in the year, then turning to green, and then late in the year, they'll turn purple. The blueberry blossoms are white in the spring, and they're heavenly smelling, and they're literally everywhere.
You can search for blueberries in rocky or sandy areas, or you can just look for a sign.
So we all know that blueberries are grown commercially down in Lower Michigan on the western side of the state, and the person that was the grandfather of commercial blueberry farming in Michigan was a professor of horticulture at Michigan State University. His name is Stanley Johnston. So he had this idea that blueberries could also grow in northern climates if they developed the right varieties. It takes quite a while to grow blueberry bushes, especially up here in the north. We have a few small plants that we've planted, and they're knee-high, and they're probably 10 years old, you know, and they don't produce enough to get a pie, unlike these big ones. These are pretty spectacular, and on opening day, these bushes were just hanging because of the weight of the berries, and roughly half of the crop has been taken off, so things have lightened up quite a bit. The conditions, I think, for a really good year are during pollination time. So you want to have good conditions during pollination to get as many of those blossoms pollinated as possible. And then warm, they tend to like warm, so an early spring is good. Blueberry bush roots don't have many root hairs, and so they need sort of frequent rains. We have 3,500 bushes. They're 50 years old, plus or minus. There's a lot of varieties. These varieties tend to get ripe starting early to mid-August, depending on the year, and continue. We can have picking on a good year like this all the way till freeze up. And so we have some varieties that don't ripen until early October, and we often don't get those because they'll freeze up before they're ready.
Well, that's it for this week. Be sure to check out 906outdoors.com, where you'll find the 906 Fishing Report, TV6 weather, shopping, and more. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next week right here on Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.